I saw men fall like wheat before the scythe. I could not raise my rifle, but I did not stand still. I drew until the smoke cleared. He wasn't supposed to be an artist. He was a soldier, barely 16, too young to vote, too young to shave. He marched in Union blue with a musket on his shoulder and a sketchbook hidden in his satchel. On the morning of September 17th, 1862, he rose before the sun, the ground still slick with dew, the air thick with silence before the storm. By nightfall, the fields of Antietam Creek would drink the blood of more than 23,000 Americans. This is not the story of generals or grand strategies. This is not the tale told in textbooks or monuments. This is the story of what one boy saw and what he dared to remember. While others aimed rifles, he raised a pencil. While others looked away, he looked closer. And through charcoal lines and hurried strokes, he captured what history tried to forget. A young soldier's hand, shaking as he sketches the wounded. A dying comrade's face, frozen forever in graphite. A nation tearing itself apart, one stroke at a time.
His name was Private Elijah Coe, 16 years old, too young to drink, too young to vote, old enough to march into hell. Elijah grew up among hills and orchards in upstate New York. His father died when he was 9. His mother ran the farm with quiet strength. He was the middle child, often overlooked, often alone. And when he wasn't tending chickens or splitting wood, Elijah drew. He drew everything. Birds in flight, the weathered face of his grandfather, the gnarled trees by the creek. Sometimes, when he was supposed to be reading scripture, he'd be sketching in the margins, little men on horseback, flags whipping in the wind. When war broke out, his older brother joined up. Elijah begged to follow. His mother said no twice, but boys don't stay boys long in wartime. He forged his age and enlisted with the 61st New York Infantry. His sister stitched a small leather sketchbook into the lining of his coat. "Draw something true," she whispered at the station. Campfire crackle fades in again. In the early days, it was all uniforms and marching songs. Elijah drew the campfires, the tents, the faces of comrades sleeping side by side. He thought war might be a kind of adventure, but then came the wounded, the coughing, the boys who didn't come back from patrol. Elijah drew those too. Not for glory, but because he couldn't look away. By mid-September 1862, his unit was heading south. Word spread. Confederates had crossed into Maryland. A major engagement was coming. No one said it out loud, but they all knew they were marching towards something big. That night, Elijah sat beside a dying campfire. He took out his sketchbook and drew a picture of the moon half-lit, half in shadow.
The road to Antietam was long, dusty, and full of silence. Not the silence of peace, but the kind that settles before a storm. For days, Elijah and his regiment moved south through the valleys of Maryland. Past stone barns, past golden fields ready for harvest, past civilians watching from porches, unsure whether to wave or pray. The heat clung to them. So did the flies. Rations were low, tempers lower. But no one complained. Not anymore. Some nights, Elijah couldn't sleep. He'd sit cross-legged by the dying embers and pull out his pencil. But his lines came out shakier now. The faces he drew weren't smiling anymore. They stared right through the page. One sketch showed a wagon filled with stretchers before there were even wounded to fill them. Another, just a pair of hands gripping a rifle too tightly. By September 16th, they were camped near a sleepy little stream called Antietam Creek. The name meant nothing to Elijah then. It would soon mean everything. That night, there were no songs in camp, no letters read aloud, just whispers. the rustle of pages turning in Bibles, the soft click of bullets being slid into cartridge boxes. Elijah sketched again. A line of men in silhouette, backs turned to him, staring into the woods ahead. One man held a photo in his hand. He didn't draw himself. He never did. But if he had, he might have shown a boy sitting very still. A boy who knew the world would look different by morning. Because dawn was coming, and with it, the bloodiest day in American history. September 17th, 1862. The sun rose red over the cornfields. The dew on the stalks shimmered like glass. Elijah stood shoulder to shoulder with men he had marched beside for weeks. Boys, really. Some whispering scripture, some staring blankly at the ground, some quietly crying. He reached for his sketchbook, then stopped. There would be time later, or maybe not. At 5:30 a.m., Union artillery opened fire. It was like the sky cracked open. The earth trembled beneath their boots. The men advanced toward Miller's cornfield, a peaceful patch of farmland transformed into a killing ground. Smoke thickened the air. The corn, still tall, hid friend from foe. Elijah clutched his rifle, but he wasn't aiming. He was watching. A soldier next to him was struck in the throat. He fell soundlessly, like a puppet with its strings cut. Elijah dropped beside him, not to help, but to draw. He tore a page from his sketchbook, his pencil trembling. Later, they would find that sheet, spattered in blood, a face, eyes wide. The wound not yet finished. By 7 a.m., the field was unrecognizable. Bodies piled 3 and 4 deep. Limbs hung from trees like broken branches. Elijah sketched frantically now, ducking behind a wagon, capturing everything. The carnage, the confusion, the wild eyes of officers yelling orders no one could hear. He watched a chaplain kneel beside a Confederate boy, no older than himself, whispering a prayer as the boy choked on blood. Elijah drew that too, the clergyman's hand on the boy's chest, the boy's lips mouthing something. Mother, maybe? By mid-morning, the fight had shifted to the sunken road. Later, it would be called Bloody Lane. Elijah would never forget it. He crawled toward the ridge where Union troops fired down into a trench packed with Confederate soldiers. For hours, they fired without mercy. And when the smoke lifted, the trench wasn't filled with men anymore. It was filled with parts of men. He didn't sketch that. He couldn't. Instead, he drew a single boot, torn empty, resting on a blood-soaked plank. And beside it, a broken rifle, with a flower stuck in the barrel. By afternoon, they reached Burnside's bridge, another slaughter. He watched as wave after wave of men were cut down trying to cross. He didn't know who was winning. No one did. But everyone knew what was being lost. Elijah had used up every page in his sketchbook. He began drawing on the backs of letters, on strips of canvas, on anything he could find. That night, he didn't sleep. He couldn't. He sat in the dirt, surrounded by moans and flies. He sharpened his pencil and kept drawing. The morning after the battle was too quiet. No drums, no commands, just the sound of crows circling overhead and the low, constant groaning of the wounded. The sun rose again over Antietam Creek, but it shone on something else now, a field of corpses. Men lay face down in the corn, some still clutching rifles, some reaching for photographs, some unrecognizable. Elijah walked the field alone. Not as a soldier anymore. Not really. He stepped over bodies he had marched beside just yesterday. He recognized a boy from Albany by the patch on his sleeve. His face was gone. Elijah didn't cry. He didn't speak. He just opened what was left of his sketchbook and drew the shadow of a man slumped against a tree, with the word "why" written beneath it. That was all he could think. Why? All around him, the living staggered through the ruins of the dead. Some searching for brothers. Some collecting canteens. Some just staring at the sky. Elijah came upon a Confederate soldier lying in a ditch. He was still breathing, barely. He was young, maybe younger than Elijah. He held out a shaking hand, not for help, but for Elijah's pencil. And Elijah gave it to him. The boy's fingers closed around it. He drew one trembling line, then stilled forever. Elijah sat down beside him. He didn't draw again for 3 days. When Elijah finally picked up his pencil again, he didn't draw soldiers or guns. He drew a pair of hands, one blue, one gray, clasped in the dirt. No faces, no flags, just hands. And that sketch became the most haunting of all. Because it wasn't about the war. It was about what it destroyed: youth, mercy, and the line between enemies. Elijah Coe survived Antietam. But he was never the same. His regiment moved on, to Fredericksburg, to Chancellorsville, to other names written in blood. But Elijah's pencil grew dull, his sketchbook full. After the war, he returned to New York. He didn't speak much about what he'd seen, but he kept the sketchbook. Folded inside it were torn scraps, stained letters, and a single pencil worn down to a stub. And on the last page, those two hands. For years, it sat forgotten in a chest beneath his bed. Until decades later, long after Elijah had passed, his great-granddaughter found it. She opened it carefully, and for the first time, the war came alive, not through numbers or dates, but through lines and shadows, pain and mercy. Elijah wasn't a famous general. He didn't write a memoir. He never fired a shot in anger. But through his eyes, through his pencil, we see what war really is. Not just strategy, not just sacrifice, but the faces that vanish, the hands that shake, the boys who never come home. His sketchbook was never meant for museums. It was meant to remember what others tried to forget. And now, you've seen it too. History is often told through battles and victories. But sometimes, it's the quiet observers who leave us with the clearest truth. Private Elijah Coe may not appear in textbooks, but his pencil gave voice to the forgotten, to the fear, the brotherhood, and the unbearable silence after the guns fell quiet. If this story moved you, take a moment to reflect on those who witnessed war not with weapons, but with open eyes and steady hands. Please consider subscribing to this channel for more human stories from America's most turbulent chapter. Not just the battles, but the people who lived and remembered them. Thank you for watching, and may we never forget what war truly costs.